that even when they met, Declan himself said, Odumodu, I'm not gonna lie, I think this song has inspired my career.
I am so excited today to be able to host someone who is a legend in the making. Teezee is a rapper, singer, songwriter, record executive, entrepreneur. He's known mainly for his career as a musician. He's one of the pioneers of Alte and part of the supergroup DRB. And he has quite a number of hits, including Stamina, which you can look up on Spotify. You can also find the video on YouTube. It's a really cool video shot in Rio. It's a really beautiful place. I mentioned Teezee is an entrepreneur. He founded Native Networks, which includes Native Magazine and Native Records, where he's the co-president. And in that role, he is a music executive who also represents Afrobeat star Odumodu Black, who has been at #1 on most of the Afrobeat charts for the past several months. And if you've been listening on TikTok, you've probably heard Odumodu's big song, Declan Rice. And I hear Teezee was a big part of creating it. I'm very curious about the story behind that one. Teezee, thank you so much and welcome to Blitzscaling a Startup.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for having me on Blitzscaling. It's a big opportunity, and I'm super glad that I'm here to have this conversation with you guys.
Now, one of the things I love doing in these conversations is making sure people get to know the guest a little bit. So they may very well be familiar with you as a musician and executive. They may not be as familiar with you as a person. Talk to me a little bit about how you grew up, because music is really in your family. I think that some of your great love for music started with your dad, Teezee Sr., so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the inroads of music for me, it's and the music business is really interesting. It's really like family based, and it's something I only realized a lot further down in my career was like the influence in the music space that my dad had in me. My dad was he was like a super cool guy growing up. Now he was a club owner at the time, so he was he had to be hip to all the musics that was kind of coming out from everywhere, just to because Nigeria is a very metropolitan city, but it's also a very big African city, so all urban sounds, all sounds, like I was listening to stuff in the house ranging from Oasis to 702 to SWV to Barry White to Fela Kuti, and those things obviously in the long run always have an effect on you. And funny enough, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was a big guy in the entertainment space. He was a man who lived many lives, but one of his lives he was in the entertainment space, and he was one of the first people who created a studio in Ibadan. Ibadan used to be the sort of like the cultural capital of Nigeria. It was the biggest city in Nigeria at the time, and he built the studio with Ginger Baker. He was one of the contributors to build the studio with Ginger Baker and Fela. So these were things I all found out later in my life, and I was like, so it's not as random as they made it seem for me to eventually venture into music. So yeah.
Now, what's interesting about that is you said you weren't necessarily aware of all these influences early in your life, and in fact, you were over there in England studying in university. Did
Yeah.
you always know you wanted to be a musician, or did you have a previous plan? You were going to be an aerospace engineer or an architect or something like that?
Yeah. Now for me, I think I always knew I'd be in music in the entertainment space. In my heart of hearts, I felt like that was my calling. For me, it was like I was one of those kids who music and sports were my everything. Like I could tell you everything about my favorite football or basketball team. I could tell you everything about the favorite artists that I followed. I was just really immersed in culture. Amongst those other things, I was really into geography, just understanding the world and where people were from and why this was that. Like those were the things that were naturally I was naturally good at, and I knew from a very early age. So, being able to kind of manifest those things and utilize them in my adult life has just been more than a blessing.
I can't help but pick up on this. I'm a huge fan of basketball and the National Basketball Association here in the United States. Do you have a
Yeah.
favorite team in the NBA, a favorite athlete?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm a Los Angeles Laker by default. I grew up worshiping Kobe Bryant, R.I.P. Those were the good times, And shout out to the team right now and Braun. I love what they're doing. We just won the first NBA tournament, so it's going in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, it just so happens that I was born in the LA area. I'm a huge
Wow,
Lakers fan. Grew up watching Magic Johnson and Kareem, and then Kobe and Shaq, and now
amazing.
LeBron and AD, and watching these incredible
Wow.
duos win championships. Just fantastic. I wish I brought. I do have a Kobe jersey, not a real jersey, not a game worn
Mm.
jersey, but a replica jersey that I got a long time ago, and we
Oh,
could
amazing.
bond over a love of the Mamba mentality, one of the
The
greatest of
Mamba
all time.
mentality. It's everything.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
Everything.
that's fantastic. We again, we could probably spend the rest of this podcast talking about basketball, but then our producer Julian would kill us. So we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I do want to dive into a little bit some of the work that you've been doing. As Julian mentioned when we were discussing earlier, I'm a venture capitalist, and so I'm really focused on trying to find great talent, great entrepreneurs, and you're doing something similar. Obviously, you're a musical star in your own right, but you're also the head of a record label, and you found people like Odumodu Black, and who's tearing up the charts. So how do you find these kinds of artists? Like, where do you find somebody who is going to be an international star? What are the characteristics that you look for?
I think for me, the most important thing is just always, I feel like, and I'm very religious as well. So a lot of the things that do happen and are like ordained and destiny written are like stuff like I believe God gave me a skill which was identifying potential talent. I think like it's one of the things, and I always tell people it's one of the skills that I knew I had from early. Whether it was like picking the best team for football, I was always by default always made the captain of the football team or the athletics team. I always just knew the right balance of picking a team. I don't know how it kind of manifested, but it was one of the things, and especially with the music because I loved it so much and the people I really looked up to, I saw that, because I was also in school and I needed to accomplish what my parents wanted me to do. If I wanted to be in the music space, I had to be more than just the talent. And the people I looked up to were doing that. The Dr. Dre's, the Pharrells, the Jay-Z's, the thou who we can't say his name anymore right now, but everyone of the sort. And I think those things really inspired me to always strive to want to support people who I felt were undersupported. When I was coming up in the industry, the alter scene was really new. It was a new branch of Afrobeats, so people didn't really understand it. So they thought it was cool, but it was definitely underfunded and undersupported. So being an early adopter to that genre of Afrobeats, I felt like a role was bestowed on me to be more than just a talent. I had to be a custodian for the other talents that were going to be pouring through this alternative Afrobeats pipeline that we kind of created. And yeah, that was it. So the ecosystem at the time, what I was looking for was a loophole. I felt like I couldn't come into the market and attack it the same way the Maven Records guys who have Ira Star and Rema were attacking it. I felt I couldn't attack it the same way the guys at YBNL with Fireboy and Ashake. I just thought they all had a different sauce. For me, I'm like, what is the game missing? If we're gonna come out the gates as a new record label in Nigeria, we need to like shake the status quo. I couldn't compete in the same lane that the big labels were competing in, but what I knew was this alternative, the underground space. I know that that's something that was untapped by the majors. So when I saw Odumodu, I just saw like raw talent. I saw the hunger of an underdog, and I just saw this like immense ability to translate beyond borders. And I thought that was super important for me because that's what the alter Afrobeat space was. Is like a lot of us we had bigger fan bases outside Nigeria than we did in Nigeria. And I think that just goes to say, we were more the internet generation where we grew up through that lens. And yeah, that's kind of how I gauge it. It's like what is the game missing? What opportunity can I find to plug in someone that is currently not in that space?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really important about what you said is that you were a steward. You were somebody who was bringing these new artists into the world and helping shepherd them. And one of the things that really struck me, I read that there was a recent interview that Odumodu gave where he said that he could have signed with another record label for 20 times as much money, but he signed with you. And he specifically said, I wanted to go with Teezee. So I'm curious, tell me about that process, because it's fascinating to be able to win over an artist who's being offered a lot more money.
So I think him knowing like the opportunity to work with a talent manager like myself was someone who has a history of being an artist. And I think Odumodo and I, we had a lot of similarities. I think we were both underdogs in a space. We were both people who thrived off the ability to be undermined. We really had that show and prove mentality. So I think for him, it would have been easier to go with, whoever was offering him loads more money, but didn't understand him as an artist, understand his vision, understand the touching points he wanted to do. Check this kid. Who understand the checking points he wanted to do. I think, sorry, my kid just walking down the stairs. I'm just making sure he's good.
That's not
He's
a
two.
problem. By the way, congratulations. I saw that he's
Thank you.
just a toddler, I guess, 2 years old. Congratulations to you and
Yeah,
Grace. He must be adorable.
yeah. He's so cute. He's such a sweetheart. But yeah, so Odumodu was like, we just knew that we were a match made in heaven because it was that young energies, and that's what we saw in traditional hip hop spaces. Like, it was always the young guys coming together to kind of change the game. It was never really like, an older person signing this young talent. They wouldn't get it. When two of you are like in the same age group and the same mental space, it's easier for there to be like cohesive understanding of what it takes to get to the next level. And I think we reference it to be like Vegeta and Goku, because if we're in an anime park, it's those two characters. When we come together, it's just this unstoppable force, and that's what we continue doing.
I tell you that we've got the NBA, we've got Dragon Ball Z. You are steeped in global culture everywhere. I always tell people one of the things that they may not realize is that Nigeria is the world's second largest English-speaking country after the United States. Most people
Exactly.
don't understand that. And again, culture is absolutely global.
Yes, this is true.
So I'm very curious. One of the things that you're doing is you're balancing life as an artist and a manager. In the startup world, we would say you're balancing life as an investor and an operator. How do you find the time to
Mm.
do that? You've got a young child as well. What are your secrets to being productive enough to be able to do all these things?
Um, I think for me, the secret is just feeling life is boundless and life is limitless. And I think when I look at all the great people that I've looked up to, and I read what they had to do to get it to the next level, from you know Steve Jobs, Elon, Phil Jackson, like Jordan. I just read all this stuff, and I've like everyone was doing multiple things and lived this boundless, like limitless life that everything everyone tells you is impossible. I have to prove to them that it is possible. If no one else can do it in the whole world, I can do it. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care about what they think. That's just how I'm going to operate for myself, because I know I'm capable of achieving these things. And the key word you said is balance, So for me, obviously, I was an artist first, but throughout my artistic career, like I said, the guys who I looked up to most in the artistic space were the guys who were artists, but also executive producers and label owners, specifically, a Dr. Dre or a Pharrell, who are good examples today. Pharrell's now the creative director of the Louis Vuitton LVMH house. So I'm like, more and more when I see stuff like that, I'm like, I'm it makes me feel more and more at peace with my journey, because I also ventured into the corporate space. I worked in an oil and gas trading firm for my first year out of university. For the first 6 months, I interned for a record label boss for a label I wanted to get signed to. Eventually I didn't get signed, and I ended up being the CEO's intern for 6 months. So I know life has its journeys. I know everything you want in life, you have to go out there and fight and get it, and it's not going to be straightforward. So balancing it is just part and parcel of who I'm going to be and who I am.
has. And again, we often forget when we think about famous artists, we think that they sprang from the womb as a famous artist. But we all come from somewhere. My
Yeah.
friend Aloe Black, before he became a famous recording artist, was a management consultant who was laid off. And if it weren't for that, economic
Mm,
downturn, who knows? Maybe the world wouldn't have his music.
honestly, Aloe was the guy. That's I Need Dollars, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Great guy.
I watched him talking. I saw him talking somewhere. It must have been TikTok. I must have seen that somewhere. I was like, whoa, that's such a cool story.
He's a super cool
That's
dude.
fire.
I also wanted to mention, since you talked a little bit about things like fashion with Pharrell, I want to put a little shine on your sister, Eretti, who is a famous fashion entrepreneur in Nigeria and around the world.
Exactly.
What's it like to have such a talented sister as well?
Oh, it's amazing, and I always say she's the 2.0 version of myself. She's way more intelligent, way more organized, and just executing her dream and vision from an early age. Right now, I think she's 23. She has the biggest streetwear convention in West Africa. She just did the BOF fashion convention, and I'm also an investor. I'm a partner on Street Soup with her, but that's really her thing. I'm just there to support as a big bro and a partner who's done run other businesses in the past, but like that's really her passion. Fashion is her passion, and that's something that kind of runs in our family. So, her going down that route was not something that was surprising. It was just something that was more than expected. We didn't think it was gonna kick off so quickly, but we're just glad that she's able to achieve what she's achieving at such an early age because it just means when she is my age, she would have been able to get way more done in a shorter period of time. And that makes me so proud and so happy.
Well, I can see that on your face. I can hear it in your voice, and you're just an awesome big brother. Which, I think leads me into my next question, which is that, as we've established, nobody does this by themselves. They have role models, they have mentors, they have friends, they have people around them. And so when people hear about you, maybe they think about some of your business partners, maybe they think about the other members of the supergroup or what have you. But how did you think about building this network of people around you? How did you choose to make someone a part of that network? And then how do you turn around and do that for others as well?
Yeah, I think that mentality really comes from how I grew up and how my parents raised me. I feel like the way Nigerians, or specifically, I can only talk about my people, the Yoruba tribe. How my family grew up was we're very family orientated people. So I saw an ecosystem of support being built from very early. My mom and all her siblings were very close. All their kids went to the same school. All my cousins, we work together, we do business together. That leads into our second cousins, third cousins. Everyone's is intertwined into working together, giving each other opportunities. That's the same side that's happening on my dad's side of the family. So a lot of the people I work with, that's why me and my sister, it's just organic and happens so seamlessly because we saw that growing up, that it's normal to do stuff like that. My business partner Sheni at Native, who's the real, I'll say he's the real brains behind the vision of Native, Sheni Saraki. He's also a distant cousin of mine, but he's someone that we knew from young. We knew each other from young. We had this shared passion and love to kind of create what's today's. We always said to ourselves when we're building Native, what would it be like to have something like the African Disney, or like that also has its own version of MTV and has its own record label and has all these things. That was the dream. How do we create this ecosystem for Africa? And we managed to build that simultaneously while doing other things and still being family and not letting that affect business. And I think that was a really strong thing that we learned from the society we grew up from. Same thing with DRB, the supergroup. I think my two partners in DRB, Bodge and Fresh, it was childhood friends. We were friends from about 10 years old. We just knew each other for a long time. We went to the same schools in the UK, went to the same schools in Nigeria, we're in the same churches. It's just all that community that had been built around us by our parents and our grandparents that just kind of trickled down to us now, finding people that were like-minded like us, that share the same values for the most part. I think that's really important when you're working with people who, no matter how people grow, they change. But the inception is it's a shared value system because of how all our parents how all our parents operated. So I think that was something that was really helpful guiding us to get to the next level.
Yeah, and that is absolutely so moving and also true because again, we far too often look at the entrepreneur, at the star, musical superstar as someone on their own, and everyone is there
Yeah.
as part of a network. One of the things I'd love to hear more about, because we've talked a little bit about your father, but I'm sure your mother was also a great influence on you. Can you talk about your mother and what you've learned from her that you've been able to apply in your career?
Wow, if I start talking about my mother, I can start crying. My mom is probably one of my, if not my biggest influence. I think she was someone who I saw her like, she did the same thing as me. Like I saw her move from the corporate world, as a company secretary working for one of the biggest banks to venturing into the events space and being an entrepreneur and a pioneer of the events industry in Nigeria, which is one of the biggest industries today. I think the other a couple weeks ago, my mom just got appointed as a acting director of one of the big banks in Nigeria, and that's just shows this like from the line of work she's done. She's also directed movies, so I'm like she inspires me
Amazing.
every day to just show that even at 60 plus, and it's so funny because and this is why I say why family is at the root of everything I do. How my mom is operating now is exactly how I heard people talk about my grandfather that lived so many lives in terms of being a teacher, to being a TV show host, to owning a studio, to being a farmer, to, like all those things. And I'm seeing my mom do those same things, going from corporate to events to owning grocery stores to now being a bank director. And I feel like that's why when I make those decisions to move from industry to industry or kind of diversify my palette, it's something that is the norm where I'm from. So even if, as parents, they'll always have the reservations and concerns because obviously the industries are different, but I'm always looking, I'm like, yo, mom, you were making some big money in the corporate industry and you jumped into the entertainment event space, so it would be hard for you to tell me not to take a risk and see what happens. But in terms of someone who inspires me on a day-to-day basis up till now, I think I would give her, she's my number one inspiration on how to navigate the world and know that, work never stops. There's no limit to your destiny and you can pivot at any time.
Yeah.
No, you don't owe anyone anything. It's what you want to do. You can pivot at any time. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've got to say, we heard a little bit of your son in the background. He's going to have some pretty amazing role models as parents as well. And I think carry on that same legacy. I think that watching your career as your son, watching Grace's career as her son, I mean, he is going to be taking in these lessons from the womb, from birth. And I'm very excited to see what he
Yeah.
does someday as well.
Yeah,
So, one
same.
of the
Every
things
day
you
we,
also
we're just
mentioned,
watching.
no, please go.
Yeah, and so every day we just watch him and just it's so fascinating to see kids and what they're into and what they're gonna be into when they're older. But I'm just gonna take in these younger moments and just always be able to remind him of like, yeah, you were really into trucks and music when you were a kid. Let's see what you do when you're 18.
Yes, no, I have children. My son is 21, my daughter is 19, so
Wow.
I've seen the journey. And they
Right.
become their own people and they choose their own path. And I just hope that
Yep.
we gave them the kind of values, the kind of culture, the kind of experiences that your parents obviously were able to do for you. So that's incredible.
Hmm. Thank you.
So I one of the things you mentioned, which I think is very interesting, and I think that perhaps people don't ask you about this as much in interviews, but you mentioned that you are a man of strong faith. And I have a number of friends who
Mm.
really have a key role that faith plays in their lives. And it's not something that people generally think about in the context of a superstar musical performer. Talk to me a little bit about your faith and how it impacts your daily life. How do you draw strength and resilience from it?
Yeah. Um, I think faith is to me is super important because I also grew up in a Christian home. You know, my mother's was a devout Christian. I grew up in the church ecosystem as well, where that's where I would say I first started like my music inspiration was in the church. You know, playing organized sports was within the church community. You know, that kind of stuff. And I think for me, it's always key because obviously that could be like, you know, anyone who could just say that, but I think key moments in life when I needed a sign, I feel like God provided me with those signs. So I can't take that for granted. I can't just put that on the being of myself and just leave it to destiny and all that kind of stuff. There's some supernatural changes that cannot be explained, and I put that faith in, you know, in God. And at the same time, I'm from a tribe called the Yoruba people. So Yoruba religion is very, I think, you know, it's also practiced as Ifa. You know, we have Orishas. So, you know, the energy, the jinn, those things are also part of my tradition and where I'm from. So as much as I am embedded in my Christian faith, I still take on board my traditional beliefs from my tribe and my people just to keep my spirituality in check. And no one's perfect, and I'm not here saying I'm not a saint and I'm not a pastor, but I do pray every day just because I feel like I've seen it help me in my life. And I do respect my spiritual traditional roots because I know those are the things that my ancestors held on to and carried when some of them were taken away to the further lands, and the ones who stayed here and were able to build these ecosystem of these family units from ground, because those things they were building wasn't of Christian faith, that was of traditional Yoruba faith. So those two things, I hold them very closely to my heart.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear how you've been able to balance the two. That's really amazing. One of the things you mentioned was that there were times when you felt directly a sign from God, a sign from the supernatural powers. Can you talk about one of those key moments in your life when faith and when a sign came to you and helped you find the right path?
Yeah, and you know, when I say sign, I don't mean literally I saw a burning bush speaking to me or any of the stuff
Right,
you
right.
see
No,
in the
no, no.
Bible.
Absolutely.
Nothing like that.
You
More
have to
like,
interpret.
more like moments, you know, more like moments in a crossroads where, in your darkest days, a moment of inspiration comes, an email comes that changes the course of your life when you think you're about to have the worst time of your life. And I was on my knees praying. And a few hours later, I get up and, you know, I've seen emails that either financially benefited me or put me in a different space, or I prayed that, you know, God, all this work I do, I need to be on this certain level. And the next 12 months, I'm in that level. And that's not just by the willpower of man. It's not. As much as people feel it is, and I know how important that is as well and how much of a role that plays, I know that there are also powers that be that don't want that to happen. So why wouldn't I lean into what I feel is going to help me get there? And even just down to basic stuff, like I always tell the kids, like for me, the first moment I had that inspiration was I'm huge on sports and football, right? In 1999, the Champions League final was Manchester United versus Bayern Munich. And I think I was about 11, me and my best friend. And it was 1-0 to Bayern Munich in the 90th minute. Any football fan around the world might take this on. And my aunt was there, was like, you know what? If you go and pray right now, United are going to score. I was like, yeah, right. She's like, yo, just try it. What's the harm? You know? So I get on my knees and like, God, please, if you let United score, I'm going to be with you forever. Guess what? It's 1-1 in the 90th minute, and that's the end of the game. It's like stoppage time, right? She said, if you pray again, they're going to score again. I was like, now you're just taking, you know, this is too far. I don't even, like, whatever. But let me try. Guess what? I got on my knees. God, please let these guys score. They scored 2-1. Manchester United win the Champions League. That moment changed my course of belief for eternity. So I give it down to United scoring 2 goals in 90 minutes and my auntie asking me to pray. So since that day, I've tried to stay on the good Christian route, and I've seen how it's helped me in my life at different opportunities. Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible, and who knew that? I don't know if your aunt even realized how much of an influence she was about to have there. Speaking of football,
Exactly.
one of Odumodu's big hits, of course, is Declan Rice, and I'm curious why you picked Declan Rice, because he's at West Ham and now Arsenal, not Man U. I mean, what's going on here?
Exactly. And I think it all stems back to this thing because, funny enough, Odumodu too, he's someone who's a big believer in faith, and, we're a big believer in destiny. And, I think just understanding that things are beyond one's power. Because when we actually went to Ghana in January, it was the first time we took Odumodu out of the country. It's the first time he left Nigeria. We went to Ghana, which is next door, just to do a recording camp to try and get some new music out. And, we went there with a strong mission of like, we want to get a big Afro hip hop record. That was like our main goal going to this camp. And on the first day, Declan Rice was the first song Odu recorded when we got to Ghana, and it came out randomly. It wasn't a premeditated. Let me rap about Declan Rice specifically. It's just everything he was talking about. He said it came to him, and he just said, "I feel like Declan Rice. I be like Declan Rice," and the rest is kind of history. And what started happening from the moment he recorded that, our friend Will Walsh, he's a good friend of ours. He's a big art curator in London. He was in the trip with us when we recorded the song, and he was a West Ham fan, and he didn't know this. And they didn't have this conversation prior. He came, he's like, "Wow, you sang about this guy. This guy's my West Ham captain. I love this guy. I know people at the West Ham page." Oh, he sent it to the West Ham page. Cool, fine and dandy. We mastered the song. I go to London. I go to the Brit Awards. Me and Will go to the Brit Awards together. Guess who is the only football player there presenting an award? Declan Rice.
Declan
We
Rice.
go to Declan's, like Declan Rice, like, "Yo, we got this artist in Nigeria. He just made this song about you. It's so fire." He's like, "Oh, cool, whatever. When it's out, send it to me." The traction keeps happening. Obviously, Declan Rice comes out to big applaud. Declan loves it so much. He messages Odumodu. We start building this rapport. And every time, what even happened? The day we released Declan Rice scored I think it was his first goal for England on the same day. And it was just an endless amount of coincidences between Declan and Odumodu's rise in the year that just seemed to be simultaneous. That even when they met, Declan himself said, "Odumodu, I'm not going to lie, I think this song has inspired my career to go to the next level." And that's what happened. By the end of the season, Declan is the biggest hip-hop song. Odumodu wins a couple of awards. Declan wins West Ham's first trophy in 75 years, becomes the most expensive British player ever. Odie is one of the biggest rappers in the country. It's just like a fairy tale, and we're just so glad that, those moments that could still excite fans, and you can still tell kids, like, just continue dreaming and continue pushing, because you never know what could happen.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I often tell people is that I'm very happy if people say that I'm lucky, because no one ever says, "Oh, look, there goes Teezee. Nobody knows who he is. He's poor. He's sad. He's miserable. He's so lucky."
Right.
It means good things are happening, and yet part of it is being prepared for luck. Part of it is knowing that sometimes something like Declan Rice falls out of the sky, but you got to follow it up. I mean, there was so much work you guys put in to get to that point, and so much work you put in afterwards.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Chris. And that's exactly, you just hit the nail on the head. And I think that's Odumodu and I's MO. It's like, it's one thing to get that window of opportunity. It's one thing to be ready and ready to work yourself to the bone to get the results you feel like you deserve. And that's something that, like I said, I think we've always been seen as underdogs. And that's why us coming together was like, it was a perfect match. We were the underrated label, the new label, the new label for the cool the cool kids, the edgy, a bit different guys that everyone kind of wanted to push to the side, and he was like the leader of this underground rap movement in Nigeria that was, not at the forefront of music at all. In fact, Afro rap or Afro hip hop was something that it's borderline frowned upon because people are like, we just want to hear Afro pop. So I think those combinations of our shared will to wanting to succeed and put everything on the line to get it done, we reap the rewards. So we're not just happy to be here. We're supposed to be here, and we know we deserve it, and we're only going to do bigger and better things.
And speaking of bigger and better things, I think you have global ambitions. You want to expand, you want culture to reach the entire world. You've signed a big partnership with Def Jam Records, for example, which is obviously a huge deal. You're looking to find artists who can expand outside of Nigeria. You mentioned, taking Odumodu out of the country, the fact that you're over at the awards in the UK, and the music is spreading everywhere. How do you find artists that can go beyond their home country? How do you create this sort of global movement? How do you recognize the scalability, if you will, in an artist or in an opportunity?
Yeah, I think globalization really helped that. I think I was growing up in a specific period of globalization, and in the period where of the I'm a millennial, but I definitely lean into the Gen Z mindset of understanding the use of the internet and how that affects stuff. Because now, in the world we're in, the kid in Lagos, the kid in Tokyo, the kid in Chino Hills, they're all into the same stuff. They're all into like remotely, even if they don't understand it. It's not even there's a huge K-pop is huge in Nigeria. No one understands what's going on, but they love it because it's for the kids. And that's what the internet has helped us do. And we've been able to tap into that ethos and that mindset of understanding that there's certain things that can cross borders if the community is right around it. And obviously now, thankfully for Nigerians be so global, the Nigerian or the African diaspora is present in almost every walk of life across the board in the continent, in the world right now. I'm seeing, we're getting offers to come on tour in Australia. You know, there's plays to go to Shanghai to go do shows. Like, it's like now the world is such a space where it's such an open format that we can only be thinking about affecting the world, and we cannot just think about our small community back home. Because what I learned is, and what I saw the greats do, is they wanted to travel the borders, they wanted to cross borders. And to me, it's globalizing this thing, making sure that we're leaving an impact for the youth everywhere. And it's not just it's not a fad, and it's not just a Nigerian thing. I think that's something that's super important to us. So yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Well, Teezee, we've taken up a good amount of your time. Incredible conversation. I could speak to you forever, but I know that you are super busy and it is much later in the day for you. But before we go, this is very traditional with these interviews, as you know. Is there anything you'd like to promote? Is there any place that people should go to follow you, to follow Native, to follow Odumodu? What are the ways that people can stay in touch and be a part of what you're doing?
Yes, the way people can stay in touch, you can find me on I think Instagram as Teezee, that's Teezee. On Twitter as TZDRB, and with Native Records, you can find us as Native Art. That's NATIVERECS. We're going to be unveiling some more artists next year, specifically female artists, because I feel like that's time to really push the button on those. And we have so many exciting things we're working on in the next few years, in fact, next few months, that I can't wait to unveil to the world. And Chris, thank you so much for this. Like, this is actually the best interview questions I have ever received. And I don't think Ade, my project manager is here, is like, I don't think I've seen me talk this much in an interview. Because the questions have just really hit home and just well thought out, and just so well orchestrated. Like, thank you guys so much for this opportunity, for letting me tell my story in a way I've never told my story before. So shout out to you.
Well, it was.
Shout out to you too, Julian.
Thank you. Yes, it was truly a privilege to have you on again. If you ever want to come on again, we would be delighted. I don't know if it would be helpful to you, but we would be delighted to have you on again. I mean, it's just such a wonderful story. And again, I think that what's so important is you were willing to share of yourself, right? It is typical that we do these interviews and we talk about our professional accomplishments, but to share the feelings you have for your family, your faith, your people, all of these, I think, make it a very special interview, and I feel privileged to have been here for that as well.